In December of 1994, Mike and I headed off to Honolulu to sail in American Hawaii Cruises SS Constitution.
Aloha! Thank you!
The legendary ocean liner was slated for a multi-million-dollar refit, but we actually wanted to sail in her before any changes were made. Like a good omen, as we boarded, a rainbow was hovering over the ship's bow and stayed there for most of the day.
73.
Okay, sir. Let me have it.
How you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Once in the lobby, we were welcomed aboard and shown to our cabin, U-173, a small economy outside double on upper deck.
So 173, right, sir?
173. Yeah, should be right on the right.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
We have an outside cabin.
Great.
We have a coach home.
As that rainbow hovered, we spent most of that first afternoon aboard Constitution's sister ship, the Independence. At one point, sounding like Godzilla, Constitution's steam whistle echoed over Honolulu. I actually preferred Constitution's supposedly dated look and livery to that of the redone Independence, which would thankfully continue to sail into the next millennium. Unfortunately, INDY's refit was so expensive, there was no money left for Constitution, which would be laid up a few months later. Little did we know at the time, this would be our first, last, and only cruise aboard Constitution. We returned to the CONNIE late that afternoon to unpack and settle in. Our cabin may have been compact, but it was solidly built and comfortable. It even had some of its original American Export Line's Henry Dreyfuss designed fittings, including a conical porthole casing. With its cylindrical shower compartment, the loo was tiny but well designed and maintained. After dinner, we headed topsides as Connie prepared to sail for Kauai after spending a day at sea. We passed through the former first-class Constitution Lounge on our way to the open decks, where both Connie and INDY were given a traditional Hawaiian send-off.
Traditional ceremony here of sail away, a traditional sail away ceremony, you might say. We're going to begin the blowing of the conch shell.
O humako no ai aloha e ano ai ke velina mai nei aloha e
And then Independence! Gigantic conga line! Here we go! If you didn't know it already, a lot of you already knew. Now they're going to be teaching line dancing. Joe's going to be teaching line dancing this week. She'll start with the electric slide.
Once Independence was well on her way, we worked our way forward for the perfect view of those twin funnels and to feel the full throttle of the Constitution's roar. And then, following in the wake of her sister and so many other liners like the Lurleen, Monterey, and Matsonia, Constitution backed away from Aloha Tower and headed for the open sea. To my eyes, the only sight more beautiful than Maui's shoreline the next morning was the twin funnels of Constitution from the vantage of her bridge wing 9 decks above the sea. We began the day with a bridge tour as Constitution meandered between the islands of Maui and Lanai.
Keep it nice and calm while people are up. They can enjoy the sound when there's something to look at.
During boat drill, I realized the irony of my chosen ship t-shirt of the day. Just weeks before, the beautiful Akili Laro had caught fire and sank off Somalia. A very thorough boat drill that afternoon included the lowering of Connie's lifeboats to promenade deck level. Those same boats would have been replaced with life rafts were the ship to have received her planned refit in 1995. For a while, Constitution hugged the emerald green north shore of Molokai, where the world's tallest sea cliffs, some up to 3,900 feet, plunge into the Pacific. On my way up to Sundeck for a spirited game of shuffleboard, I stopped to document Constitution's Tropicana Showplace. And as for my shuffleboard game, the less said, the better.
Here we are again, playing shuffleboard, and I'm kicking Peter's butt 8-0. Return.
The next day, which just happened to be Christmas, our gift to ourselves was a rental car, which we drove to Kauai's Waimea Canyon for a stunning view that put my acrophobia to the test.
I bet if I step about 10 or 15 feet back, it'll be a better picture.
Peter, you gotta scoot back. Scoot back.
And if
back,
you put
Peter.
it on action, then you can get some nice tumbling down the ravine shots.
Maybe even more beautiful was the view overlooking Kauai's Napali shoreline. And then there was Wailua Falls, which may look familiar from the opening credits of TV's Fantasy Island. We wrapped up our self-guided tour of the Garden Island with a view of the North Shore surf before returning to the Constitution, which would overnight in the port of Nauwili, allowing us more time to explore Kauai the next day. The ship was very quiet that evening, with many of the staff on shore leave, so I made sure to document the main deck foyer and the former first-class Hibiscus dining room. The next day, we explored the south shore of Kauai, stopping first at the Spouting Horn, then heading to Polihali State Beach, where parts of Jurassic Park was filmed. Back aboard the Constitution early that afternoon, we had time to enjoy the ship's beautifully terraced afterdecks. And while most guests caught up on their tans, I aimed the cameras inward, capturing the Princess Grace room, dedicated to Constitution's second godmother, Grace Kelly. In 1982, Princess Grace rechristened the Constitution when she returned to service for American Hawaii cruises. The Whale Gallery was another intimate space adjacent to the Constitution Lounge, dedicated to Hawaiian culture. The former first-class promenades were renamed the Islander Lanai during the ship's latter years. Later that afternoon, we headed back out on deck to watch as Constitution departed Nawiliwili for Kahului, Maui.
Wow. Wow.
Species. We're just taking the area. Like,
So not necessarily.
the diversity here was tremendous.
In Maui, we took a morning excursion that began with a rainforest hike in the Kulau State Forest Reserve. There were some great views of the Hana coastline, and for those who dared, a chance to take a plunge at Upper Waikani Falls.
Oh my gosh.
On our way back, we stopped to ogle the waves on Maui's north shore. That afternoon, Kahului Harbor provided some excellent vantages of our brilliantly lit ship. The Constitution was one of those rare classic beauties who looked magnificent from every angle. Back aboard once again, my documenting continued with the Tradewinds Terrace, the former first-class Commodore's Terrace, on aft prom deck. From there, I headed down 2 levels to the former cabin and tourist class areas on main deck. The disused aft portion of the conference center was originally the tourist class Vulcan Bar. And the forward portion of the conference center was originally the tourist class Tireno room. I wrapped up the day's ocean liner archaeology in the Lahaina Landing, the former cabin class Barbary Tavern, on aft upper deck. Before putting the cameras to rest, we witnessed our gallant liner exchange a steam-powered salute with her attending tug. In Hilo the next morning, we headed off on my first ever helicopter excursion. That's a nervous grin if there ever was one. Almost immediately after taking off, we caught a nice glimpse of Constitution and Princess Cruises' first Golden Princess on her way to see Kilauea's massive lava flows and the dramatic coastline of the Big Island. Having been dormant for years, Kilauea had just recently begun to erupt, sending rivers of lava into the sea. With each flow, the Big Island gets a little bigger. After circling Kilauea's cone, we headed back for one more view of the two ships. Back in Hilo Harbor, I marveled at a tiny portal of sunlight that broke through the shadow of Constitution's counterstern overhang. My afternoon of Constitution documenting began at the Beachcomber Bar, the former first-class pool cafe. Steps away and presiding over the pool itself, my favorite surviving artifact was a bronze frog with a tiny snail on its back. Up on Sports Deck, the former solarium was Constitution's fitness center, where her refit realized it would have been converted into a block of suites. One of the highlights of the cruise was being granted access to so many behind-the-scenes areas, like the forecastle and the machinery spaces. On our way down to the engine room, we stopped at the Coral Theater on Coral Deck, then visited the laundry area, and even peeked in at an original dining room chair in the engineer's office.
Expensive 50s American export line chair.
I'll go into more detail in the decked features that follow, but it was such a thrill to see those Babcock & Wilcox boilers in action. And of course, Constitution's instrument panels boasted polished brass gauges and repeaters. We wrapped up our engine room visit in Shaft Alley, emerging just as the Golden Princess began her departure. Although 22 years newer than the Constitution, the Golden Princess, which was built in 1973 as the Royal Viking Sky, was on the verge of becoming a classic in her own right. The sleek ship would ultimately end her days as UK-based Fred Olsen Cruises Boudica at a scrapyard in Aliyah, Turkey in 2021. We savored a few more balmy moments on Sports Deck before heading down to dinner. American Hawaii's service was friendly and informal, and the food was hearty and plentiful, with an emphasis on popular American courses like steak and shellfish. We enjoyed our table for two in the Hibiscus dining room next to a friendly couple who were kind enough to point the cameras at us. After dinner, we headed up to starboard boat deck as Constitution sailed past the embers of a Kilauea lava flow. On our final day at Kona, I did what any red-blooded vintage ocean liner lover would and rode the tender back and forth to capture every possible angle of the Constitution in her briny element. Henry Dreyfuss, the American industrial designer known for designing the Western Electric Model 500 telephone, the Hoover Model 150 vacuum cleaner, the New York Hudson Central locomotive, the Polaroid SX70 camera, and numerous other appliances created the distinctive look of the Independence and Constitution. From their slender cigar-shaped funnels to their terraced afterdecks and Titanic-era counter sterns, their look was a Jules Verne-esque combination of classic, streamlined, and fanciful. And that huge tender at Kona made my task all the more enjoyable, providing plenty of elbow room for camera juggling. We did manage to squeeze in a scuba excursion that day, giving us a chance to dive amongst some big colorful fish and several sea turtles. But I was at my happiest riding that tender for its views of our beautiful ocean liner. Although intimate by today's standards, at just under 24,000 gross tons, the Constitution looked huge and powerful that afternoon. At one point, we did take another break from tendering at a local eatery that offered a nice view of the ship. And during our final return to the ship, Connie's boilers gave Kilauea and Mauna Loa a run for their money on carbon emissions. If it were up to me, I'd probably still be riding that tender, but it was time to return to the ship, unpack, and prepare for our homeward journey. On our final morning, the INDY beat us in and took our former berth. We disembarked, but instead of going to our hotel, took the first morning harbor cruise, which departed across from the historic Falls of Clyde sailing ship. Although she couldn't hold a candle to the two Dreyfuss liners, an interesting Japanese cable ship was berthed nearby. This would be the last footage I would take of the brilliantly lit Constitution. And what a nice bonus it was to capture both of those counter sterns together in one shot. As for the INDY, I would sail in one of her final cruises in 2001 and document her several more times before she too vanished. You can see here how she looked after her refit, missing her lifeboats and sporting American Hawaii's latter-day livery. And here they are in their American Export Line's prime at Genoa in the 1950s. I'll finish here with this nostalgic pairing of the two sisters and hope to follow soon with a full-decked history and top-to-bottom tour of Constitution. And if you enjoyed this, please remember to hit like and subscribe to the Midship Cinema YouTube channel. Thank you.